Yes, my name's Ted Glick. I'm speaking on behalf of Beyond Extreme Energy. For the last 2 years, Beyond Extreme Energy, or BXC, has been taking action at FERC and speaking out at monthly commissioners' meetings. Let me mention the next monthly commissioner meetings. It's the third Thursday of every month, is on December 15th. And we are looking for people who've never been into a commissioner's meeting to go into the meeting. So please see me if you're interested. And I'm serious about that. Our campaign of sustained nonviolent direct action has included an 18-day water-only hunger strike in front of FERC last September before Pope Francis's visit to D.C. BXC members also participated, even before there was a BXC, in 3 meetings in 2013 and 2014 with then FERC chairs John Wellinghoff and Cheryl LaFleur. We started BXC in July 2014 because we lived in or had worked with local communities, like those represented here today, whose concerns were disregarded, dismissed, or overlooked by FERC. Although FERC makes a charade of hearing public testimony, and of late secret testimony, the public's concerns are routinely brushed aside or explained away. The Commission never allows the public to speak at its monthly meetings, hence BXC's planned interruptions. Although commissioners have noticed our actions and even referred to us as, quote, a situation, unquote, back in January of 2015 it was, the agency has not changed course. With only one exception, FERC has approved every industry permit for frack gas pipelines, compressor stations, storage, and export facilities. FERC has been acting in this manner for decades, a captive agency of the fossil fuel industry in general and the frack gas industry over the last several years in particular. FERC commissioners often come from industry, as people have spoken about. They come from industry and land jobs in the industry upon leaving it. Just last month, Bloomberg News reported that the FERC Chief of Staff, Larry Gastiger, was leaving to work for Public Service Enterprise Group, Inc., a Newark, New Jersey-based power and gas utility. The Smog blog has reported on several cases of commissioners ruling in favor of companies while their spouses were consultants for or represented those companies. For example, a FERC official's husband was a Dominion Power consultant at the same time that the official was reviewing permits for Dominion's massive and controversial frack gas export terminal at Cove Point, Maryland. And as Karen Ferridan referred to earlier, an investigative report in Greenwire in April 2015 revealed that, quote, ethics records throughout 2014 show agency staff seeking employment with grid operators, law firms, and utilities that the agency has jurisdiction over and often meets with as it sets new orders and rules. In addition, FERC employees have held stock in or remain part of pension plans from companies that can be affected by the agency's work, unquote. FERC is also notorious for refusing to address in its environmental assessments the harm to our climate from frack gas infrastructure build-out. Methane, which leaks tremendously all throughout the whole process of fracking to the point of burning the frack gas, methane leaked into the atmosphere is 86 times more powerful, according to the IPCC, than carbon dioxide. The EPA earlier this year criticized FERC for failing to consider climate change when it approved the Leach Express frack gas pipeline that runs through Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. Finally, we note that the incoming president, Donald Trump, will be able to appoint at least 3 new FERC Republican commissioners, one of whom will likely be chair and probably at least 1 Democratic commissioner. BXC and allies expect to oppose these nominations strongly, given that these appointees will most certainly be accountable only to the fossil fuel industry and will not safeguard the public, the climate, or the earth, our only home.
Hear, hear. Good afternoon. My name is Glenn Bessa, and first I want to thank the Delaware River Keepers for organizing this People's Council and for you serving as judges today. The topic of this section is Future Generations Ignored, and I'm here to speak about climate change. I recently retired as the director of the Virginia chapter of the Sierra Club, and I'm testifying today on behalf of the Virginia chapter. Over the last 2 years of my employment with the club, I've been directly involved in opposing the Atlantic Coast and the Mountain Valley pipelines, and I continue to work on those pipeline projects as a volunteer. Sierra Club is very concerned that the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is not fulfilling its responsibilities under the August 2016 Council on Environmental Quality final guidance for federal departments and agencies on consideration of greenhouse gas emissions and the effects of climate change in the NEPA review process. That's the title of that report. There are other important documents that FERC is ignoring as well related to climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. I'm going to refer to FERC's September 2016 draft environmental impact statement on the Mountain Valley Pipeline as an example of how FERC is ignoring the law. FERC acknowledges that the CEQ guidance on greenhouse gas emissions and the effects of climate change, they're acknowledged in the report. There's a short summary there, and in the scant 3-page consideration of climate change, FERC superficially assesses and ignores the CEQ guidance, concluding that, and let me give you a quote, "Because we cannot determine the project's incremental physical impact on the environment caused by climate change, therefore we cannot determine whether the project's contribution to cumulative impacts of climate change would be significant." Okay, so don't worry about it. This conclusion directly contradicts the CEQ's guidance, which states, because they must have anticipated this, it states, quote, "A statement that emissions from a proposed federal action represent only a small fraction of global emissions is essentially a statement about the nature of climate change and is not an appropriate basis for deciding whether or not to extend, whether or to what extent to consider climate change impacts under NEPA." So FERC has already failed that test. They basically dismiss it because they say it's just a little bit and who cares. In its draft EIS, FERC does go to the trouble of attempting to calculate the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the Mountain Valley Pipeline, but they really don't give you any clue as to exactly how they came up with these numbers. Furthermore, FERC then moves on and simply dismisses them, as I noted above. Ignoring the substance of the CEQ guidance, FERC's draft EIS fails to consider, and these are key words that are in the CEQ guidance, they fail to consider alternatives to mitigate the direct and indirect effects of greenhouse gas emissions related to this project. Further, they fail to consider the cumulative effects of this and other pipelines before FERC. They're just not doing their job. FERC apparently has ignored the testimony of Richard Ball, Dr. Richard Ball, that was submitted by the Sierra Club, and that report was entitled "Greenhouse Gas Emissions Associated with Two Proposed Natural Gas Pipelines in Virginia," specifically the Mountain Valley Pipeline and the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. That report, and Dr. Ball worked for EPA and Department of Energy throughout his career. He's a well-respected scientist, even worked on IPCC panels. He concludes the estimates of the the carbon dioxide equivalent of both the Mountain Valley Pipeline and the Atlantic Pipeline in that report. He calculates the direct and indirect greenhouse gas emissions for the Mountain Valley Pipeline to be at between 54 and 91 million tons per year of CO2. One of the other provisions in the CEQ guidance is not only must you not dismiss these emissions, but you need to put a frame of reference on them, and obviously FERC doesn't do that. If you consider the frame of reference of the total emissions in the 2014 EPA inventory of emissions, that EPA inventory of emissions in Virginia included 177 sources, and the total emissions reported in 2014 was 49 million tons of CO2 equivalent, okay? So 49 million tons is what were calculated in the emissions of stationary sources by the EPA, and this project, as estimated by Dr. Ball, is over 50 million tons. So that doubles the total emissions associated that are currently inventoried from stationary sources in Virginia. Finally, I want to point this out. Finally, Obama administration's mid-century strategy for deep decarbonization, that is a document that was just recently released, that is the United States blueprint for compliance with the Paris Climate Agreement, calls for, and quote again, economy-wide greenhouse gas emission reductions of 80% or more below the 2005 levels by 2050. By these standards and the other documents I mentioned, FERC's climate analysis of pipelines, as represented by the Mountain Valley Pipeline EIS, is woefully deficient. Thank you so much.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Catherine Strickler, and I live in Harrisonburg, Virginia. At my age of 72, time speeds up, and life seems incredibly short. This makes actions taken for future generations seem all the more urgent. I don't have much time, and we don't have much time. We have already seen extreme weather increase dramatically over the past several decades, and the prediction for droughts, heat waves, heavy downpours, and hurricanes are that they will continue to increase in frequency and intensity. These events are fueled and exacerbated by too many carbon products being developed and used, and then the waste products dumped into our precious atmosphere. Because of this, people are dying now, and millions more will die in the future. I was part of the search team in Biloxi after Katrina that combed the beach at extreme low tide for debris and human bones. This is real. FERC is making those decisions now. How many people will die? Those decisions are being made very close to here in a beautiful building that I have visited many times. I have protested inside at the commissioners' meeting and many times outside on the sidewalk. My husband was one of 10 that fasted 18 days at FERC's front door, demanding no new permits for fossil fuel infrastructure. Inside, the process continued to keep permitting more carbon products to be transported that result in deaths. Outside, the fasters became weaker and weaker, finally walking like the half-dead. And still, that last night of the fast, some went to a service at the Washington Cathedral on the eve of the Pope's visit that highlighted the morality of direct action against climate change. Where is the morality inside FERC? People will die. Carbon products are killing people. These gases are like a bullet in very, very slow motion. Who is pulling the trigger for that bullet? FERC decides if it will pull the trigger or not. People will get killed due to the premeditated actions of FERC. Premeditated killing is murder. Murder for greed. Where is the morality inside FERC? I'm using stark language to portray a stark situation. FERC is isolated from the stark results of their work. FERC must change. Anything other than a complete paradigm shift is a collusion of guaranteed murder for greed of millions in future generations. We look at history and see the Nazi gas chambers and know that it took the collusion of many people operating in isolation to manufacture and use them, people who were in denial of their part of an incredibly sad loss. Is our current situation any different? It is not. FERC must stop colluding with the destruction of our precious atmosphere. Human lives are at stake. Thank you.
My name is Ted Cady. I live in Myersville, Maryland, Frederick County, just 100 miles up from here. I'm a board member of the Myersville Citizens for a Rural Community, a grassroots organization formed nearly 5 years ago in response to Dominion Transition Inc.'s construction, operation, and now planned expansion of an oversized natural gas compressor station within our town. FERC project approval process is an utter failure. The FERC environmental assessment conclusion and the subsequent certificate are inherently invalid due to numerous process and analytical flaws. I'll just name two. One, the EA is superficial, arbitrary in its conclusions, and lacks proper detailed consideration of the short and long-term impacts of the environmental, health, and safety risks in a community so close to a gas compressor station. My town's been around since the 1800s. They built it in our town with people already there. FERC failed in proper due process to allow full citizen participation. FERC issued its untimely certificate prior to the town's denial of the DTI local zoning permit request. DTI then leveraged the certificate using federal preemption to sue both the town and the Maryland Department of the Environment. FERC wrongly empowered DTI to circumvent and repudiate the local zoning permitting and the MDE state implementation plan of the Clean Air Act. The town will face over 18 tons per year of particulate matter 2.5. This is that fine particulate matter that gets lodged in your lungs. These emissions equal over 1,700 idling semi-trucks. This equals more than one semi-truck per person in my town, or 3 trucks per home. This nearly equals the grand total number of 1,715 parking spaces in the 40 commercial truck stops across all of Maryland. In effect, FERC has allowed the largest truck stop to be created in my town. Listing in the following pages, which I won't go through, but again, thank you, Delaware River Keeper. The following pages are fundamental errors of the FERC process as well as 23 additional notations. The citizens of Myersville have spent thousands of dollars in opposition of the natural gas compressor station within the existing town limits that is now directly impacting our health and safety based on the arbitrary and capricious FERC approval that violates the Natural Gas Act, NEPA, and MCRC's due process rights. Thank you.